Want to say Shalom Lak, Mash Paka. Want to say peace and blessings to you, family. Just want to take a quick moment to talk to you guys real quick. Just thought I'd take a moment out of my time as I transition to another appointment. But just thinking about the thought of the law of Moses. And I think that the law of Moses, the way that it's taught, especially in the church, really is where the confusion is. The law of Moses. We hear that a lot. We hear that a lot. We're not under the law, or that's the Mosaic law, or that's the law of Moses. But the question is, when you ask someone from the church, explain the law of Moses, right? Explain the law of Moses. Want to say shalom to you, Tiffany Moore. Want to say peace and blessings to you, Charles West as well. And when you ask them what's the law of Moses, they can't answer the question. Peace and blessings to Second Exodus. When you ask them, okay, explain to me what is the law of Moses? And see, one of the questions that I trip up those from within Christianity, I tripped up so many pastors who have taught that we're not under the law, that we don't have to abide by the law of Moses. And this is questions that I would trip them up with even before I converted and transitioned our assembly out of Christianity. So my question I would ask them is, well, where's the commandments? And what is the law of Moses? And they cannot give me a clear answer on it. And what they would do, excuse me, what they would do is they would go to Acts chapter 15 and say, oh, look, right here. The disciples told the non-Israelites that they don't have to obey the law of Moses, right? But that's not incorrect. Excuse me, I should have drank some water before I did this live. But real quick, right? We have to understand things in its proper perspective. We have to understand it. This is how you get to the root. Let's start with Acts chapter 15. The overall discussion is not whether or not to obey the law of Moses, right? Because if we understand the law of Moses, right, the law of Moses is actually what we would call the first five books of the Bible. The first five books of the Bible is what? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That is called what? The Pentateuch. And also some of your translations, it will list it as the law of Moses. So when many are saying that we're not under the law of Moses, so what you're saying is that we don't have to abide by what's inside contained in the first five books of the Bible. What's inside the first five books of the Bible? For starters, we'll see the promises of the Most High. For starters, you will see, as you see in the scripture that's highlighted, Exodus 34, you will see that the covenant is contained within the books of Moses or the books of law. You'll see the Ten Commandments. You'll see the covenant contained there. All right. So when we understand that, let me see here. I'm not sure if I can mods. If there's any moderators here, it looks like someone is named G-Man or whatever, dealing with some negative confessions of my remove that nonsense. And I can shut that down with ease, not getting into all that negative confessions that comes from the Book of the Dead that is recited over someone. It's a eulogy that is recited over someone that's transitioned, so to speak, in the Kemetic or the Egyptian culture. Not getting into all that nonsense right now. And know the Ten Commandments did not come from the negative confessions. All right. The Ten Commandments are what they are. They were there from, truth be told, they were there from the very beginning. But anyway, when we deal with this, right, going back to my point, remember the uh, the Messiah all through the book of Matthew. You'll see it in quoted in John. You'll also see it quoted in Acts, right? You'll see Apostle Paul using the quote. You hear the term law and the prophets. See, back at that time, you didn't have what today you have in the translations, the Bible translations, a New and an Old Testament. That phrase, New and Old Testament, that's actually a second to third century construct, right? To make a separation. The whole goal was to separate the what is actually called the law and the prophets, separate that from the Christian canonization. That's a whole nother discussion of what they wanted to be inside the Bible, which was their Bible, which would be the gospel or the good news of the disciples, the letters of Apostle Paul, and whatever other letters from their so-called church fathers. The goal was never to have uh, the uh, the scriptures in terms of the law and the prophets included in their canonization. But anyway, right? So when we look at the law of Moses, right? The law of Moses is the first five books of the Bible, right? And within the first five books of the Bible, you have what? You have the Ten Commandments there. You have the explanation of what the covenant is. In Exodus chapter 34, guess what? It tells you that the Ten Commandments is the covenant. So when you get to Acts chapter 15, many will take that and say, look, uh, the disciples, they were the whole primary focus was telling the non-Israelites that they don't have to obey what's written inside the law of Moses. The law of circumcision is written in the law of Moses. Fact, right? That's why the Messiah had to make it clear to the Pharisees that the the law of circumcision said, hey, it was given to you by Moses, right? But said that it existed before Moses. So the law of circumcision existed before Moses, right? So the law of circumcision was the primary argument in Acts chapter 15. Had nothing to do with whether or not they should honor the commandments of the Most High or listen to the instructions that's contained in the law and the prophets. The Messiah made reference to that in Matthew chapter 5. Law and the prophets. Think not that I come to destroy the law, but the law and the prophets. It's not just the law, it's the law and the prophets. He's dealing with what? The canonization of what the scriptures were called at that time, which would be the law and the prophets. He said, think not that I come to destroy the law and the prophets. Right? So he's dealing with all the word, right? So where are they getting this logic from? It's poor theology, this theology of grace that is being taught to say you don't have to abide by any of the structure that the Most High put in place. If the Most High already had a plan to do away with his law, statutes, and commandments, why would he in Deuteronomy chapter 8 use that to test, use the trials with the Israelites while they were in the wilderness for 40 years? Why would he use that as a test, a barometer to see if they would honor the what? His commandments. So family newsflash, the covenant, right? The covenant is the Ten Commandments. So when these guys try to teach and say, hey, the Most High is going to, the new covenant is the Most High got a whole new covenant, and they'll go and say, hey, the love the Most High and love man, that's the new covenant. That's not a new covenant. That's contained in the Ten Commandments. Let me say that again. That is not a new covenant. That is contained in the Ten Commandments, period. Now, I'm not sure why I can't see my live, all right, the live chats, right? So again, that is contained in the Ten Commandments, right? That the Messiah's argument, right? The discussion that he had when you get to Matthew chapter 22, he was asked by lawyers, hey, what's the most important? What is the most important of all the commandments? They didn't say, the argument was, or the discussion wasn't to do away with the commandments. The argument or the discussion was, what do he feel? What do the Messiah believe to be the most important out of all the commandments? right? Because they were trying to trip him up. And he said the first thing that's important is to what? Love the Father. And he said the second thing is important is to love each other. But he didn't stop there. He says these two key principles, now I'm paraphrasing, right? He says these two principles, right, hinges on or hangs on the law and the prophets. He said the law and the prophets hangs on these two things. In other words, the law, the books of Moses, the first 5 books of Moses, as well as the prophets, is going to teach you these two key principles: to love the Father and love one another. That's not a new commandment, right? Because many will go to John and say, hey, look, you see new commandments. No, he did not give a new commandment. That was already there, even before Moses existed. All right. So that's part of the confusion, because they would teach that, oh, we don't have to obey the law. Well, no, the commandments is the covenant. Most High is not coming back to write a new covenant in terms of new guidelines. Jeremiah chapter 31, the difference between what was written on the rolls and written in stone is that the Most High said he was going to do what? Circumcise our hearts and place his commandments inside what? Our hearts. Isn't that what Apostle Paul taught? See, Apostle Paul, when you go to 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 19, Apostle Paul says circumcision and uncircumcision doesn't matter to him. But what? The commandments, obeying the commandments. He didn't say the commandments of Christ. He said the commandments, you'll see God there, but he's referring to the commandments of Yah, because that's the commandments come directly from the mouth of Yah. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 3. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by what? Every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yah, so a man live. So you can't even say you have life without honoring the commandments. You can't say you understand the covenant and you speaking against saying, hey, we don't have to abide by the law. What are you talking about? The 10 commandments are the foundation. That is the covenant. That is the renewal of the covenant. There's not one out of the 10 commandments, not one commandment that's hard for us to abide by. In Acts chapter 13, the non-Israelites came into the temple asking to be what? Taught on what day? The Shabbat. They came in the temple on the Shabbat, asking to be what? Taught on the Shabbat. So how is it that the church has come to this conclusion that we don't have to obey it, but they're teaching man's law? So the Pope get to modify and come up with all kinds of commandments, and now the church is abiding by those same things? No, again, the covenant is the 10 commandments. Now, here's what you could shut them down with this nonsense about and get to the root of exactly what was the argument. When you go to Galatians chapter 2, Paul makes it clear that he was given the approval to go out to the non-circumcision, the uncircumcised rather, and Peter was confirmed to go out to the circumcised. You had Pharisees who believed in the Messiah, who were teaching that you don't have to, that you need to be circumcised. That was their primary argument. So when you go to the rest of the scripture of chapter 15, the disciples took the same approach that the Messiah took when the Messiah was dealing with the tithe. When he told the Pharisees that they're majoring in the minors, he said there's weightier matters to deal with. Y'all focusing on the tithe. Well, guess what? You got people that's dealing with far harder things, harsher things that they need help in, areas that they need help in. He didn't do away with the tithe. He said, hey, there's weightier matters. So the disciples, what? They followed the Messiah's instruction. They followed his example. They focused on the weightier matters. Okay, right now, when we have those that are non-blood descendants of Israel, let's focus on the weightier matter. The weightier matter right now, let's make sure they're not fornicating. Let's make sure they're not eating food sacrificed to their deities. But they did not disregard the scriptures. They did not disregard the law and the prophets. Even Apostle Paul says that Apostle Paul used the law and the prophets to what? Confirm the Messiah. So, family, again, I just thought I'd take a moment to give clarity because there's a lot of craziness that you still see being taught from the church that keeps teaching this nonsense. And many within this awakening have taken on this practice or this belief that we don't have to abide by the commandments. Even Moses, matter of fact, before I get to that point, when you understand Jeremiah 31, it said that he was going to what? Write his laws, place it into what? Our heart, our inner parts. That's what? A circumcision of the heart. Is that new or is that renewed? Where was the instructions of the Most High stored at when Adam walked this place? Where was the commandments of the Most High when Noah walked this place, when the Most High handed the commandments or handed the covenant down to him? Because again, the covenant is the 10 commandments. Where was it written at? Why did Moses have to tell Israel back in Deuteronomy chapter, I believe, chapter 16, that they need to have their hearts circumcised, even after getting the covenant? Why did he tell them that they need a circumcision of the heart? And why do he go on in Deuteronomy chapter 30 and said that a time going to come that the Most High is going to what? Circumcise their heart. What is the circumcision of the heart? Take these commandments, take this covenant and not have it so that way they're just focusing on it being written on stones, written on a roll. You know how many will idolize the actual print of the Bible? You know, come on, you guys grew up like I did with that big white Holy Bible on your coffee table, and you was terrified to knock this thing over. You was terrified. Many people have more fear in the physical Bible than the actual words that are written inside the Bible. So that's the circumcision of the heart. So that way we won't just have fear. We won't make the writings right into an idol. That these two tablets that was written, the commandments were written on. When you start understanding Deuteronomy chapter 27, will not make it into an idol. Like my uncle used to put the Bible on his dashboard. No, you're going to have it what? Written in your heart. That is what is called the circumcision of the heart. Now, Paul is not saying that you don't have to be circumcised. He's saying he's focusing on what? The commandments, the covenant. And what's within the covenant? The 10 commandments. The 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the Yod. In the Israeli language, they say Yod. But the Yod, the 10th letter, means redemption, outstretched arms. So when you start changing that letter, you start changing redemption. That's why the Messiah said not one jot, one tittle. That's the Greek, right? Greek, jot, iota, or iota. One tittle, kerais, shall be removed or changed within what? The law and the prophets. He said, don't change not one word. Don't change not one letter within what? The law of the prophets. He told his disciples, he's dealing with his disciples. He said, make sure your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the Pharisees, talking to his disciples. He's making it clear to his disciples, just like you preach his word, just like you going out to spread the good news, you have to abide by it too. Don't forget that you have to abide by the law, which written in the law and the prophets. Because if he was doing away with it, then there was no need for the remainder of chapter 5. Actually, the Messiah, he stepped the game up. He stepped the standards up. So, family, I just thought I'd take a moment to talk to you briefly about some of the stuff that's being circulated, even among this awakening. Many are still teaching that, hey, we don't have to abide by the law. And when I hear that, I can clearly tell that most that are saying this don't have a clue about what the law is. Don't have a clue about what the law of Moses is. So again, I challenge anyone, explain to me what Paul meant when he said in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 19, circumcision, non-circumcision doesn't matter. But following what? The commandments of Yah. What are those commandments? What are those commandments? You can't just say love, because guess what? You know, again, I gave clarity on what the Messiah says towards that. So with that being said, family, I just thought I'd take a moment just to really give clarity here. So when people say new covenant, again in the Hebrew, the same word for new and renew is right there. And the Hebrew word is kadash, or uh, yeah, kadash, and holy is quadash. But Hebrew for new and renew is kadash. It means to make a new. It's not just what many would say, oh, it's new. No, it means make a new. So you can have a relationship, a bad relationship, let's just say with a family member, and make it what? A new, right? You can have a car and restore that car and make that car what? Like new, a new. So renew, and when you get to the prefix, right? The word forming re, it means to what? Get back to the original place by undoing some things. By undoing, you can't say that you want to get back to the Most High is going to get us back to that place where Adam was or whatever. If we don't want to undo and get back to what Adam did, Adam honored the commandments, right? The Shabbat is part of that 10. It's part of the covenant. So again, you know, whenever you hear someone say, we're not under the law, you ask them the question, define the law. What is the law? If they say we're not under the Mosaic law, explain the Mosaic law. Give me detailed information on it. Don't just say Mosaic law. Don't just say, no, give me detailed information, because the covenant is contained you in the law, what's called the law of Moses, the first 5 books. How are you going to even learn about the covenant if you disregard the first 5 books? It's not for your leisure if you choose to believe it or not. That's there. So with that being said, family, it's straightforward, family. I'm not going to take too much time of your time with that. But again, I just thought I'd take a little time out just to give you a little clarity on that, because I get it just it gets up under my skin when I hear people say that same old thing. We are not under the law, and then they go to the same old scriptures. They go to Acts chapter 15, and then they go to Apostle Paul's letters, especially Galatians. And when you read Galatians, all through Galatians, Paul is dealing with the law of circumcision. And to confirm that, the primary argument was the law of circumcision that they're dealing with in Acts chapter 15 is Paul makes reference to it. The entire chapter 2 of Galatians is addressing and giving clarity to Acts chapter 15. And you will see that they were not telling those that are not blood descendants of Israel that they don't have to honor the commandments. That's Isaiah chapter 56 too, right? When you go to Isaiah 56, right, it says if there's a eunuch or if there's sons of strangers, in other words, foreigners that want to what? Have a relationship with the Most High, guess what? They have to what? Take charge, take command. They have to keep his what? Covenant and honor the Shabbats. Take charge, take hold of his covenant. That's the 10 Commandments, and made it clear for them to honor the Shabbat, because that's been one of the commandments that have been argued against over and over again. So the sons of strangers, right, which is non-blood descendants of Israel, and also the eunuch, right, has to what? Have to what? Honor the covenant, which is the 10 Commandments. And the point of emphasis that was also placed was the Shabbats. Why? Because we know the Shabbat is inside the 10 Commandments, but we also know, right, that the feast days are also considered what? Shabbats. Duh. So that's what that prophecy of Isaiah is referring to. So again, family, anyone says anything outside of that, whether they in this truth or not, they're still up under Christian theology. They're still under the theology of grace, which was created within actually Catholicism. Right? When you understand the theology of grace, do you know, man, theologians were killing each other murdering each other over the theology of grace. Because if one disagreed with the other, they kill them. When you start understanding, what's his name? I can't think of his name. Calvin, John Calvin. When you start understanding what was happening back then, the theology of grace, man, he saw deaths of those that disagree with him. You know what I mean? He didn't care about that. Hey, you disagree with them, off with your head, basically, or burn you at the stake. And that's supposed to be according to the word? Nah, that's man stuff. That's man's doctrine. So again, family, I want to say this again. Don't get caught up, don't get swayed away when you hear people say these things like, hey, you don't have to abide by the law. The law is done away with. That's completely incorrect. And I can prove that within the text of Matthew chapter 5. Because the Messiah began to teach out of what? He began to teach out of the law, which many call the law of Moses, and began to go into what? The covenant. He began to teach right beyond you. Once you get beyond the law and the prophet, once you're beyond, let your righteousness exceed the righteousness of the Pharisees, you start seeing it was written of old, but I say unto you. He was dealing with the commandments. He didn't have to convince his disciples to honor the Shabbat because they were already doing that. Just like uh, Paul did not have to beat in the head to those non-blood descendants of Israel to honor the Shabbat because they were already doing that. Again, Acts chapter 13 reveals this. So with that being said, family, I'll say it again. Don't get caught up with this trick doctrine. Don't get caught up with the foolishness. Study the word for yourself. Study the word for yourself. Now, I'm not going to say that everyone that's teaching that we're not under the law are purposely trying to deceive, right? I'm not going to say that because many are just going to echo what they've heard and what they've been taught. You could be up under the spirit of what is called the parakeet or the canary, right? That or the ventriloquy, where so you're just repeating, regurgitating what's being downloaded into you, what you've heard, right? And so that's part of the problem. That's what's happening right now when we hear people say we're not under the law. Now I would say, even for me as being a former Christian pastor, now being a pastor in this truth, I'm still a pastor. I want to make sure you guys understand. I didn't stop. I didn't walk away from my responsibilities. I still honor my roles and responsibilities, my commitment as a pastor, but I'm not doing it in Christianity anymore. I'm doing it outside of Christianity. But when I was there, guess what? That's the one thing I didn't honor. I didn't honor the Shabbat. And it weighed on me when I really started getting away from these layers of theologies, of different tiers or levels of theologies. I had to break free from those things. And then as I just went back into the Maccabees, as I began to really go back over the book of Genesis and Exodus, actually the entire law of Moses per se, when I gone over that letter by letter, line by line, again, it made it clear. And then all it took was for me to read the Maccabees again. I read it when I was a young minister, but when I went back over the Maccabees and really paid attention to the historical accounts there, and saw how they rededicated the temple, but how they fought to honor the Shabbat. And you saw the same problem there, you know, that the Greeks being led by Antiochus, who was a Syrian, who was all caught up in the Greek culture, how he wanted to, the whole thing was to try to get the Israelites to profane the Shabbat, eat pork, and not be circumcised. And then we see Apostle Paul and those guys dealing with that in the book of Acts, chapter 15. Come on, family. Come on, family. It's just that simple. Sometimes we made things so deep that we're losing so many people because of it. It's not that deep. It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. The Messiah did not change. He did not do away with the commandments of the Most High. Why? Because the commandments of the Most High is the actual word of Yah. So why would you say that we don't have to honor the commandments? It's optional. Why would you say that the Most High, or insinuate the Most High gave one law to the Israelites and one law to non-Israelites? That's not how a government works. That's not how a community works. The United States have one constitution. Right at one time when they were divided, the North and the South, when you start understanding the um the Civil War, right? The South had their own constitution. It's a fact. The North had their own constitution. So they were divided. It sounded like Israel, right? But even then, Israel still had one covenant. They were a divided community, but one covenant. But when you understand and really put things within the proper context, right? Think of Israel being a nation just like the United States. Anyone that wants to come to the United States, right, and want to become a citizen of the United States, they're going to have to learn what? The Constitution. They have to take classes to understand the Constitution. They have to also understand other things like the history of the United States. They have to learn the president's name, all the president's names. They have to learn all the states, the state capitals. They have to really learn the culture of the United States. Well, likewise, if there was non-Israelites that wanted to what? Become citizens among the Israelites, they had to do what? Circumcision was one of them. When you read Exodus chapter 12, right? Circumcision was a requirement. And you had to honor what? Passover. That was part of being a citizen. It said one law to the homeborn and what? The stranger that's among us. The Most High never established his kingdom to have two sets of rules. Just like you guys have your homes, you don't have your homes in place to establish two sets of rules. Rules for your children to abide or your children's friend to abide. No, when the children's friend come over to your house, guess what? They have to abide by the same rules of the house. You're not telling your children not to jump on the table and you're going to allow the friends to come jump on the table. You're not going to tell your children that they can't jump on the chairs, but then you allow strangers, their friends come in and jump on the chairs. No, one law. But we don't have to stop right there. We could go all the way back uh, to Abraham, where Abraham was given the covenant, not created a new covenant. The covenant was established with him. In other words, made stable with Abraham. In other words, it was handed down. But when you read it, guess what? Everyone within the household of Abraham had to be circumcised, whether they were what? Blood descendants, or whether they were what? Servants and foreigners that dwelt inside his property within his household. They all had to be circumcised. One law. So where did we get to this point thinking that the disciples and the apostle Paul, those guys were teaching two different things? That the disciples are teaching something contrary to what the Messiah taught. And the Messiah was teaching something contrary to what the Most High, because he said in John chapter 7 that his doctrine that he teach is not that of his own. And I'm referring to the Messiah, that what he's teaching is what the Most High has given him, which is he always quoted out of what? The law and the prophets. So again, family, circling right back to that, right? You cannot get away from it. You cannot get away from it. Absolutely. So how can he abolish something that he kept? When you say that the Messiah said that we don't have to honor the law, he did away with the law, you say that the Messiah did away with himself. Because John chapter 1 tells us that the Messiah, right, is the word of the Most High that became flesh to dwell among us. So when you say we don't have to honor the law, right? When you go to Exodus chapter 31, you'll see that the Most High wrote his commandments, wrote his law with his finger, wrote his law, wrote the commandments on tablets and gave it to Israel, gave it to Moses. He wrote it with his own hands. Moses got to see the writing of the Most High in ancient Hebrew, what they would call Paleo today, in ancient Hebrew. And now you're going to say that we don't have to cover that? We don't have to honor that? Come on, family. The Most High wrote that covenant himself. So family, again, I know I said I was going to be brief. Let me stop it here because I still got to get me something to eat. You know, So let me answer this question. Okay. Oh, okay. So circumcision isn't physical, but the law. Well, let me give you clarity. Circumcision is physical. When you read about, when you go to Genesis, I believe chapter 15, and also you get to chapter 17, you'll see when the Most High gave as a token of a sign, right? When we deal with the word sign, token or sign, oath, right? As a sign of what the agreement. This is where you get what your signature when you enter into an agreement. You what sign your name, right? When you have a package that's being delivered to you, you have to do what sign your name. So as a sign, as a token, as a proof, as evidence, right? That Abraham agreed to what the covenant that's being handed to him, signing off saying what? He's in agreement. Now he had to be what? Circumcised. So circumcision was what? A sign that you what? Obeying the covenant and that you receive the covenant of the Most High. So the issue that you saw happen with Apostle Paul is Apostle Paul is not saying that we don't have to be circumcised, but he's trying to give the proper clarity that's saying what's more important is circumcision of the heart. And what I said earlier is that circumcision of the heart was something that did not start with Apostle Paul, right? Because Moses said and gave a prophecy to Israel in Deuteronomy chapter 30 that they were going to that the Most High was going to circumcise their heart. So again, yes, we still get circumcised, physical circumcision. But what Paul is saying that what's more important or just as important is the circumcision of the heart, right? And when you say here, right, I see Jasper, we don't have to honor the 613 laws. The commandments are automatically done with love. Now, see, this is where we have to get away from that 613. Actually, that 613 is a number in the Kabbalah. There are not 613 laws inside the law of Moses. That is a Kabbalistic number, right? The Kabbalah, just like the 6 million or that is a Kabbalistic number within the Kabbalah that they use to get people to regurgitate. So there's not 613 laws, actually when and that's a whole nother teaching. But to give proper clarity, right? In the government, you have laws, right? And you have statutes, just like what you see inside uh, the scriptures, right? Look at the commandments, right? Look at the commandments, the covenant, those 10, those foundational commandments, just like when you look at the Constitution, you have what? Those 10, right? The 10 that you will never be changed, right? But nevertheless, you have the commandments, right? You have laws, you have statutes, but just to make it simple, right? Just in this country, you have over 5,000 federal what? Laws, right? But then you have over 50,000 statutes. What's the difference between the two? The statutes are the instructions on how to what? Carry out the law. Let me say that again, right? The statutes are giving you the instructions on how to carry out the laws. Let me say that one more time. The statutes are what? Instructions on how to carry out these laws. So when we look at the scriptures, when we see laws, statutes, and commandments, right? We know that statutes are in place to show you how to carry out the law. So you may have the law of sacrifices, right? But then you have statutes to show out how to carry out the law of the sacrifices, the law to sacrifice and how to carry it out. So you have the law of the sacrifices, but then you have statutes on how to carry out the instructions. But you're still focusing on what? The 10, right? The laws and the statutes is still what? Helping you honor what? The foundational 10, the covenant. So again, when you see statutes are instructions on how to what? Keep the law. Keeping the law, statutes, still what? And commandments, what? Guess what? Those things are what? Still pointing to how to ultimately keep the covenant. So again, family, don't get caught up with the junk doctrine. So I want to make it clear. We're not, of course, part of the covenant that was handed down to Abraham, because it said the covenant was given to Abraham and his seeds. So that means that, you know, uh, Somebody get this guy out of here. I mean, this person, Jasper. Because see, this is where I don't like to just uh, get this guy out of here, because or this guy or whoever this person is. Because when you start getting into disrespect, I don't tolerate disrespect. You could disagree, but because you disagree doesn't mean that you have to be rude and you have to be disrespectful. Just completely block this person, take this person, don't even allow this person to come back on. Because when we start dealing with, like many would say, love. If you're talking about love, if you say you operate in love, there's still a criteria of how to understand what love is. The Most High made it clear, to love the Most High, you have to what? Keep His commandments. That's in Deuteronomy. So again, going back to, as Jason pointed out, physical circumcision is, as I pointed out, is a sign. It's your signature, right? It's a sign. It's a signature. It's a sign. It's a proof. It's evidence that you are what? Signing on that you're going to work, receive the covenant, right? So again, family, this is part of the problem that was happening with this doctrine that's been taught from Catholicism and Christianity. Don't even realize, if we love the Father, we're going to keep His commandments. Even the Messiah said that. And if we love Him, keep what? His commandments, right? You can't even say you have the Holy Spirit if you teaching against the commandments, because the Messiah said, right? If you love Him, keep the commandments. And as you're keeping the commandments, He said, I'm going to go to the Father and I'm going to ask the Father to send the Holy Spirit. So you can't have both sides. You can't have both sides of the flood. Either you're on the right side of the flood or you're on the wrong side. You can't be in that lukewarm trying to what? Press forward with a certain agenda. And again, Apostle Paul, when you read Apostle Paul, when you read Romans chapter, the entire chapter, when you get to chapter 2, again, Apostle Paul continued, and actually you'll see a little shift, but Apostle Paul began to what? Focus on, hey, if you circumcise, guess what? It's all about your heart. Because you can make your circumcision become uncircumcision if you're what? Disobeying, if you break in the covenant. He said you're breaching the agreement. So again, you know, uh, that's what Paul was dealing with. He was dealing with the circumcision of the heart. But you hear different. You hear how Paul shifted from Galatians to when you read Romans. So again, Paul. I'm not even going to just focus on Paul, but I'm going to say this again, family. Uh, this is where we have to get back to the basics. And what I'm teaching, what I just shared, even though I'm going off the top because I don't have my stuff in front of me, and we'll do a thorough teaching on that. But again, family, that's the basics right there. You can't get no, I can't make it any plainer than that. And if you want to really get an understanding of the commandments, if you want to get understanding of the covenant, just think about the Constitution of the United States. Think about, when you start getting into constitutional law, and you'll see a different approach to the scriptures. All right. So again, the heart, we could go through all what we're doing, but if we don't have a change of heart, what is it? What is it for? We could honor in our minds thinking we're honoring the law, statutes, and commandments, but if our heart doesn't change, what was it for? We can honor the feast days, right? We could go to the ceremonies, the repetition of it, but if you don't have a change of heart, and if you don't understand why you do it, then guess what? You're doing it for nothing. It's no different than the church doing what they call Holy Communion on every first Sunday of the month, 12 times a year. Guess what? You know, if you understand that, right? If you grew up in the church, you had people take a not circumcision, Holy Communion, and guess what? They still sinning. They still drinking. They still smoking. They still cheating. They still doing all these different things in the church. In the church. So you still, and the church will teach you. My pastor taught, hey, if you in sin, don't take the Holy Communion. So it's no different than what we see in the scriptures. It's all about what? A change of heart. You can do all these different things, but if your heart didn't change, like the rich young ruler, he said, I did all these different things. I honored the commandments, but he didn't want to follow the Messiah because the commandments going to teach you how to follow the Most High, going to teach you how to follow the Messiah and how to follow his spirit. And that rich young ruler, he said he did all of this in his mind. He did all of this in his mind, but he couldn't follow the Messiah. So let's see here. I'm respectfully asking you that physical circumcision is not required, right? No, you still required for physical circumcision. You know, I mean, you can even look up the medical portion of it as well. But physical circumcision is still required. It's not done away with. That's scripture, right? You know, that law of circumcision was put in place not to Moses, but to Abraham and his seeds. So if we're Abraham's seeds, guess what? The law of circumcision is for Abraham's seeds. And guess what? All those that want to what? Be part of the house. you know? So, but again, the question is, what happens to those that are what? Newly converts, what happens? What happens to them? See, that's what they were talking about. They were dealing with that. Because I'm going to say for you guys, for me, right? When you truly love the Most High and he did everything to pull you out of certain situations, you don't have a problem to doing the things that pleases him, right? You don't have a problem with, uh, uh, um, doing the things that pleases him. For starters, let me address doing that's Jewish old law. You don't know the scriptures, you don't know the text, right? Again, show me one scripture that said that the Messiah did away with the law of circumcision. Show me one scripture that says that the disciples did away with the law of circumcision. I just gave you examples about Abraham, right? Abraham, when the covenant was given to him, all those within Abraham's house had to be circumcised. When the law was given to, matter of fact, when we look at Exodus chapter 12, it said that who else had to do it? Not just the Israelites, but it said those that are what? That are among them that want to what? uh, be considered citizens, they had to be what? Circumcised. That's scripture, whether you like it or not. That's not my word. But what, again, Acts chapter 15, they said, let's not major in the minors. Let's start with the little by little thing. Let's start with the weightier matters. Let's start with the simple stuff. See, what happens when many come into many's ministries, they try to throw everything at them in the kitchen sink instead of saying, let's take this little by little approach. Little by little. Let's just take little by little. Let's start with the basics. See, we try to throw everything at them, especially even in this truth, even in this awakening. Oh, you better do this. You better do. They throw everything at you. Because again, I was a Christian pastor. I didn't honor the Shabbat. And some of the people that know me from the beginning, when I transitioned our ministry, guess what? I was still teaching. I was teaching that it was okay. Sunday worship was cool. That we didn't have to honor the Shabbat. I had every argument down packed. And it was hard for even those that's within the awakening to even come at me. But guess what? It took the love, my desire to please the Father. And guess what? Little by little, in time, by me studying the word, I got to see that I wasn't correct. And guess what? I changed. So family, guess what? We're all growing in this thing. But we don't have to be nasty to each other. See, that's what really trips me out about, the people in the church. They nasty to those that are teaching contrary to their theology. But they quick to say, let's do what Jesus did. Well, if we're going to do and mimic the Messiah was circumcised. The Messiah honored the Shabbat. The Messiah honored the feast days. The Messiah made a priority. He made it a priority to go to who? The blood descendants of Israel. He didn't turn down to help those that were non-blood descendants, but he made it clear his priority is to come and bring salvation to the lost, chosen people of the Most High. So, family, it's this is where we have to look at things from, get outside of this rhetoric, this nonsense that we had birthed in us and all, and just really get back to what the Most High says. All right. I know I went a lot longer than what I anticipated on doing, but family, I don't mind addressing certain things like this, because why? Because, you know, this is how we grow. This is how we grow. And I'm going to tell you, at one time, I did not honor the Shabbat. And no matter how many times people tried to argue with me, it had to be what? Little by little. It had to be little by little. But the more I studied properly, free from these theologies, and really studied, and because of my heart to wanting to do whatever it takes to please the Most High, I didn't have a problem with saying, man, I was wrong. And I came out of that. I came out of that. And I could go against, I could shut down every talking point of those that say that we don't have to honor the Shabbat. We don't have to honor the feast days. I could shut down every argument, every discussion towards that. Because guess what? I too was on that side of the argument about the Shabbat and the feast days. But then when again, change of heart, studying and love. And I had to look at it like, wait a minute. We have church anniversary, but we can't do the feast of dedications. Wait a minute. We, even though we didn't celebrate Easter, but guess what? We call it the Resurrection Sunday, but we can't honor the Passover. See, this is again programming. This is all mental programming. Actually, not mental programming. This is spiritual programming. This is hacking into what you know is right, according to the Holy Word. I had to come from up under that stuff. Family, that's why nobody could tell me what it means to be humble, because I even had to tell our assembly that I was wrong. I had to tell other pastors, other leaders that I was wrong. I had to repent to our assembly, say, I taught you wrong. I taught you wrong when it came to those things. But guess what? I could tell y'all straight up. The Most High gave me a sign that I did what he said do. Because guess what? I could tell you emphatically, since we changed, I'm going to share this a little bit, and I got to really, really get ready to go. My wife and I, and most pastors, this is the contrary to what most people think about pastors. A true pastor, most pastors that you see inside the church, many of those guys are taking money out of their own pocket to keep that building functioning, to keep those lights on. The true pastors, because why? A lot of people don't give like you think they do. There's a lot, especially during hard times, people have more. They have, especially in the seasons of like the winter, there's a lot of things that goes on, and people deal with a lot of hardships. So we would give out so much money. We would do all these different things like we're supposed to do. But when truth be told, my wife and I, we don't even go over the offering like other ministries do, because we was part of those ministries, being in Kojic and being in the Baptist church, where they made sure they got their money out of you. In the Baptist church, you paying tithes, you giving offering, you giving dues. Man, in Kojic, I seen them raise $1,500 from 9 people. I don't know how they did it, but we refused to allow our ministry to be subjected to that stuff. So guess what we did? We said, when we start our ministry, we're not going to focus on all that stuff. We'll teach the proper correction with clarity about what offering is, tithes and offering is. And that's on the people. That's not our responsibility to go into the journals and look at the ledgers and see who gave what, like many churches do. They go into the ledger. They ask you for your pay stub, so that way they know how much you bring in and how much you should be given to the temple based off of tithe. We didn't do all of that stuff. But guess what? For the first 8 years of the ministry, almost 9 years of the ministry. My family carried the ministry. My family made sure the lights was on. Whatever the ministry was short of, it came out of our pocket and we never told anyone. And of course we gave tithes and offering. Whenever the ministry was short, it came out of our pocket, right? And when people had a need, guess where it was coming from? Because the ministry didn't have it. We took out of our pocket, our personal finances. And then what we would do, we'll filter it through the ministry so that way the people don't feel like they have a personal obligation to me and my wife. So, we did that for almost 10 years, almost 10 years, just to make sure people don't feel like they have an obligation to me. And people can validate and vouch for my wife and I character. And what we'll tell people that say, hey, well, we owe the church, we owe it. No, you don't owe us anything. What you owe is that you take this blessing and you be a blessing to someone else. If someone has a need, you help that person that's in need. That's what we would do. And we continue to do that. But you know what? This is the favor of the Most High, right? When that pandemic kicked in, family, when the pandemic kicked in, things flipped. We have overflow. We have overflow. And that's helping so many different people, but we have overflow. Overflow. My wife and I, we did not have to come out of our pocket for anything because now guess what? The ministry is taking care of itself. Get this etiquette out of here. Get this etiquette out of here. Get this etiquette out here because this person is being ignorant. This person is being disruptive. Get this etiquette out of here. Family, I don't have time for stuff like this. So I can speak for my own personal experience of what we've done to the ministry. I know some of you guys probably saw images of my wife and I living in a beautiful house, my wife and I driving nice cars, my wife and I dressing fine. But guess what? It took a lot of work, but we had all of that before we started our ministry because my prayer was, Yah, I don't want the people to even have the slightest thought that we accumulated all these things at the expense of the people, at the expense of the people. So I worked a 9 to 5. You know what I mean? Worked a 9 to 5. Got the receipts for it. Haven't received a single dime for the ministry. We don't have a salary. No, my salary is from my line of work, my place of business. So we made a point to make sure that we didn't take from the people. It was many times that our own children lacked. But we made sure that the lights were on so people could come and complain about where the money is. I know, yeah, I'm saying that as a little joke, but people always want to come in and hey, where the money going at? Man, get out of here with that. The same ones when they try to pull your card, and then when you say, all right, well, let me give you, a full summary of where the money is going. Now, let's see what you contributed. Man, anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. So, family, I'm going to say this again, and I know I went longer than what I anticipated on going. When you truly had the love of the Father, just even what the Messiah said to Peter, he said 3 times, if you love me, feed my sheep, because he had to undo all the 3 times he cursed the Messiah. If you love me, feed my sheep. So, family, again, don't get caught up with the craziness, this poor teachings that are out there. Yes, we're going to be honoring the Feast of Purim. If you guys are interested, I'll post it in the community portion of the channel. And if you guys are interested and you want to come and celebrate Purim with us, let us know. If you want to honor the Passover, because that is coming up as well. If you guys want to come to Virginia and honor the Passover, feel free to do so. Let me know. My email me at wearewokenow at gmail.com. And I'll get you the dates. And if you guys want to come, feel free to do. And let me make this clear: we don't charge. We don't charge people for coming. Everything is free at our ministry. Everything is free at our ministry. Let me say that again. Everything is free at our ministry. Even before I transitioned from our ministry from Christianity, we've never had church anniversaries and people have to do all kinds of pledges and all that other. We never played that stuff, right? We always, on every function we had, we never charged the people. Never had the people have to charge them for anything. Everything came out of pocket, out of our pocket. So guess what? And anyone that came to any of our feast days, they would tell you they never had to pay for anything, but they eat good. Why? Because, that's how things are supposed to be. We're supposed to lay things out so that way it's not becoming a business to the people. It's not a franchise. They don't want to come in and feel like the ministry is a franchise. Nah, if you choose to give, guess what? That's up to you. You know the responsibilities that you have and your commitment that you made to the Most High. That's between y'all two. I'm not getting between that. But guess what? When you come to our ministry, you're not going to feel like we're nickeling and diming you from the time you come inside the ministry to the time you leave the ministry. And family, I never cared about having a mega ministry. Fact. Never cared about that stuff. So from me to you, family, again, I encourage you guys, you know what I mean? You know, go back over this presentation and I will teach again uh, about the circumcision. I'll teach with clarity again about the law and the prophets. I'll teach again about the law of Moses, and we'll walk right through all these arguments that many continue to teach. So, family, I appreciate you guys. Again, for those that want to honor the feast days, reach out to me offline. Um, you guys already know we're all family here and we are all trying to walk this thing out together. So with that being said, family, I know I went longer than what I anticipated on going. So I had to really go, but we'll be doing a live part 2 of identity theft, this, or should I say active hostility, part 2 to the message that I taught for over 3 years, literally. Over 3 years, taught the same message for over 3 years. So part 1 is there. I'm going to do part 2, and hope that blesses you. So with that being said, family, I got to really go. I know I said that before, but I got some meetings I have to attend. So love you, family, with the love of the Most High, and appreciate you guys. Have a blessed remainder of the day. Shalom.